Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really interesting tension, maybe even a painful one for some organizations.
hmm
What if the very systems we create, the rules, the structures, the things meant to strengthen our communities, whether that's churches, nonprofits, whatever,
Right. Yeah.
what if those are actually sort of quietly suffocating them?
Yeah, it's that experience, isn't it? Watching local energy just fade, often
Mm,
under the weight of structures brought in from somewhere else or things that just get way too bureaucratic.
exactly.
You start with something vibrant, rooted, alive, and somehow you end up with this machine
Hmm.
running on policies someone else wrote.
The sources talk about seeing communities that look, well, organized on paper but paralyzed in practice.
That phrase, paralyzed in practice, that really hits home. And that's what we want to avoid, right?
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive is really to um, figure out how we build self-governance that genuinely empowers people, not controls them. We're looking for principles that shift us away from what the sources call imposed order towards Indigenous ownership.
And a big part of that starts with recognizing the problem itself. These imported systems often just don't work.
Right.
When organizations just copy governance models, maybe from like Western denominations or even corporate structures, they often end up mimicking bureaucracy without even realizing it.
They don't fit the local reality.
Yeah, exactly. They don't account for the local culture, the relationships that matter there, the specific needs on the ground.
And what I found fascinating, and this lifts it way beyond just an admin headache, is how the sources insist governance isn't just about org charts and bylaws. It's actually a theological statement.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. When a community decides how power works, how you handle conflict, who gets a voice, it's actually declaring what it believes.
Yeah.
What it believes about authority, about trust, about human dignity even. Think about it. If your system basically says only a tiny group at the top can be trusted with decisions, what's that saying about how you view everyone else, about their agency?
That's a powerful reframe. Okay, so if governance is this theological statement, what are the sort of biblical foundations the sources point to? I think you flagged three key ones.
Yeah, three big ones. First up is Imago Dei, the idea of dignity and agency.
Okay.
Governance has to start by recognizing that ordinary people have moral agency, inherent worth.
Yeah.
Not just the leaders, not just the highly educated, everyone.
So if your structure inherently distrusts the local community?
You're essentially denying the image of God in them in a
Mhm.
practical way.
Wow, okay. That flows directly into the second one then, shifting from contract to covenant.
Exactly. A contract is, well, transactional. I do this, you do that. If someone breaks the terms, maybe the deal's off, you lawyer up.
Right, very procedural.
But covenant, biblically speaking, is about relational commitment,
Yeah.
binding ties, mutual obligations, belonging.
And that plays out very differently in practice, I imagine.
Huge difference. If you run on contract thinking, conflict means you check the rule book, maybe assign blame. If you run on covenant thinking, conflict means you look towards forgiveness, restoration, how to mend the relationship. It fosters belonging, not just dependence.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, dignity, agency, covenant over contract. What's the third foundation?
Delegated stewardship. The idea here is that authority isn't something leaders just have inherently. It's always delegated.
By God, ultimately.
Yes, or by the community under God, which means it's always accountable. Leaders are stewards, serving a higher purpose. The telos, the community's reason for being, not their own status or ego.
And the moment they forget that.
That's when stewardship slips into domination, which is
Right.
precisely why the architecture of governance needs to be designed to prevent that.
Okay, so foundations laid. Let's talk architecture. Design principles. You mentioned four.
Four core principles for building this freedom-protecting structure. The first one is, well, it sounds a bit like a paradox, enabling constraints.
Enabling constraints. Okay, unpack that. Rules usually feel like they limit freedom.
Right, but the sources argue true freedom isn't just, doing whatever you want. It's the capacity to love well, to flourish together. So good rules should be enabling.
How so?
Think of it like the guardrails on a scenic overlook. They aren't there to stop you enjoying the view. They're there to keep you safe so you can enjoy the view without falling off the cliff. They protect the space for flourishing within safe, trustworthy limits.
Ah, I see. So rules focused on control stifle things, but rules focused on enabling flourishing actually create freedom.
Precisely. They define the space where creativity and shared life can happen safely.
Okay, that's helpful. But it does raise the question of who decides and how efficiently things get done.
Mhm.
Which brings us to the second principle, distributed authority.
Lack
Subsidiarity, right.
Exactly. Subsidiarity. The core idea is simple. Decisions should be made as close to the lived situation as possible.
The Jethro principle from Exodus.
That's the classic example. Moses is burning out, trying to judge every single case. Jethro, his father-in-law, basically says, this is nuts, delegate. Empower capable local leaders to handle the day-to-day stuff.
So the default should be local decision-making.
Yes. Centralization needs a very good reason. It shouldn't be the automatic assumption.
But isn't there a tension there? Doesn't decentralizing sometimes lead to, I don't know, inconsistency or inefficiency across a larger organization?
That's a fear, definitely. But the sources actually suggest the opposite is often true long-term. Centralization creates bottlenecks. Decisions get made slowly by people far removed from the actual context, so they're often not the best decisions anyway. Local leaders, the ones living the reality, they can often decide faster, better, and they're more directly accountable for the outcome.
So central bodies should focus only on the really big picture stuff.
Things that genuinely affect everyone equally, like the core mission, the telos, shared doctrine, maybe major ethical boundaries. Everything else, push it down.
Okay. Enabling roles, distributed authority. The third principle really intrigued me. Formation as governance. This sounds less like structure and more like soulcraft.
It absolutely is. The point here is that if you only rely on rules and processes, your system will be brittle. That's where the source is used.
Brittle. Meaning
It can look good on paper, but shatter under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You can have the most perfectly written constitution, but if the people in the system haven't been formed, shaped to value humility, service, the common good, they'll just find ways to game the system.
So governance has to include shaping character.
Yes. Things like apprenticeship, mentoring. They aren't just nice-to-haves, they're governance mechanisms. They ensure leadership is passed on through character and wisdom, not just a title.
And things like confession, how does that fit?
Practices like confession, or even just starting meetings with prayer or reflection on shared values, they remind everyone involved that they're accountable to something bigger than their own agenda. It shapes the desires of the decision-makers towards service, not power. It makes power struggles less likely.
That's deep. Okay, and the fourth principle deals with when things inevitably go wrong. Restorative processes.
Because conflict will happen. The key is that accountability shouldn't primarily be punitive. It shouldn't just be about finding fault and kicking someone out.
I like the Matthew 18 model.
Exactly that pattern. Start private, then small group, then the wider community if needed. But the goal throughout is always restoration. Repairing the harm, mending the relationships, bringing people back into the fold if possible.
So less, who broke the rule and what's the punishment? And more.
More, what harm was done here? To trust, to the relationship, and what steps, listening, apology, maybe restitution can we take to repair that damage and move forward together? The aim is repair, not just exclusion.
Okay, that four-part architecture enabling constraints, distributed authority, formation, restoration is really powerful. But then we hit a major theme in the sources. Context matters. This seems crucial.
Absolutely crucial. This is where we face the danger of, well, cultural imperialism and governance.
Explain that.
It's the reality that structures developed in one cultural context, say, a highly literate, individualistic, Western culture, often fail miserably when they're just dropped into a completely different context.
Like an oral culture, for example.
Precisely. The governance structure has to fit the soil it's planted in.
And the sources draw a big distinction between literate and oral cultures in how authority works.
Yeah, it's fundamental. In, say, our modern Western context, authority often resides in the written word, right? The policy document, the legal statute, the signed contract.
Sure. Get it in writing.
But in many oral cultures, authority is carried differently. It's in relationships, it's in shared stories, it's in the lived experience and testimony of trusted people.
So handing someone a 50-page policy manual
Might mean almost nothing compared to the word of a respected elder whose life story is known and trusted by the whole community.
The sources use that image, don't they? The elders at the gate.
It's such a vivid picture of this embedded authority. These elders weren't powerful because they had an official title from some far-off headquarters.
Well,
their authority came from proven character and public witness. Right there in the community square, everyone knew them. Their lives were part of the shared story. That's where deep trust comes from.
and this changes how decisions actually get made, doesn't it? It's not just about voting.
Not at all. In these contexts, you often move away from simple majority rules, or even demanding everyone be wildly enthusiastic. The goal becomes something more like achieving no fundamental objection.
No fundamental objection. What's the nuance there?
It means ensuring that everyone involved can actually live with the decision, that it doesn't violate someone's core conscience or deeply held values or threaten the community's well-being. It respects dissent while still trying to find a way forward,
How do they reach that?
often through storytelling. Multiple rounds where people share their perspective, their history, their concerns. It takes time. There's a lot of listening, honoring different views. But the decision, when it comes, tends to be much more stable because everyone feels heard and the process itself built consensus.
And I think the sources mentioned sealing these decisions differently too, not just signing a paper.
Often, yes, using public ritual, maybe a shared meal, a blessing, a ceremony, something that embeds the decision in the community's memory and shared life.
Okay, but not all cultures are purely one or the other, right? Many are in transition.
Exactly. Lots of places are becoming more literate, but still hold strong oral traditions. For these transitional contexts, the sources suggest a hybrid solution. They call it modified consensus.
So keeping the relational aspect but adding some written elements.
Yes, but keeping those written elements simple, not complex legal documents. Maybe like one-page summaries of key decisions, using audio recordings because the spoken word still carries weight.
And crucially,
Crucially, using pilot periods, trying things out before locking them in. This adds accountability and lets you learn without totally abandoning the relational wisdom.
okay, so we've got the foundations, the architecture, the need for context. Let's bring it home with some practical tools. How do we actually start building these kinds of structures?
The absolute non-negotiable starting point, according to the sources, is defining your telos,
Your purpose.
your ultimate purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every community needs that short, clear answer to why do we exist? What kind of flourishing are we trying to create here?
And why start there?
Because that telos becomes your compass.
Right.
Every rule, every committee, every process you consider, you have to ask, does this actually serve our core purpose? If not, get rid of it. It stops the bureaucracy from just growing for its own sake, becoming an idol that distracts from the real mission.
Makes sense. Compass set. Then what?
Then we can use that Jethro framework operationally. Remember Exodus 18, observe, distribute, equip.
Right.
So observe, look honestly at who's making decisions now, where the bottlenecks are. Distribute, start sorting decisions into tiers.
Tiers,
Like tier 1, everyday operational stuff. Push that decision-making way down to the local level. Tier 2, policy decisions, more complex things that affect multiple areas, maybe a specific team handles those. Tier 3, the really big constitutional highest stakes decisions. Those stay with the top accountable body.
Okay, triage the decisions. And the third part, equip.
Absolutely vital, linking back to that formation principle. You can't just dump responsibility on local leaders. You have to equip them. Provide training, mentoring, resources, wisdom. Delegation without equipping isn't empowerment, it's just abandonment.
Got it. And to keep things agile, to fight that paralysis we started with.
Embrace piloting and iteration.
Yeah.
Seriously, the sources push this hard. Prefer trial periods over trying to write permanent, perfect policies from the start.
Why is that so important?
Because you will get things wrong initially. Trying to create the perfect comprehensive system on day one almost guarantees you'll build something rigid that lacks life, that can't adapt. Piloting lets you learn, lets the community test things out, make adjustments, prove something works before you commit fully. It makes governance reversible, adaptable.
Less risk, more learning.
Exactly. And the final plea, maybe the hardest one in practice, is for lean governance. We have to actively fight complexity.
Meeting bloat, committee creep.
All of it. Governance needs to be intentionally simple to survive long-term. The sources suggest things like a rule of 3, minimum necessary committees. Keep records clear and transparent, but minimal. And this is key. Give every policy a sunset clause,
What?
a built-in expiry date. If a policy or committee isn't actively justifying its existence after, say, 2 or 3 years, it automatically disappears. You have to constantly prune complexity, otherwise it just multiplies.
That's radical. Okay, this has been quite a journey from the deep theological grounding to these really practical tools. If we boil it all down.
The core shift is this. Governance isn't ultimately about control. It's about stewardship. It's about designing the architecture that protects and channels freedom towards the community's true purpose.
Empowering the local, not centralizing control.
And the promise, when that happens, is that movements multiply, leaders mature, and communities flourish. It creates the framework for life, not just structure.
But throughout all this talk of structure and rules, the sources keep pulling us back to something deeper, don't they? The spiritual health of the people involved.
Yeah, they argue pretty strongly that institutions are much less likely to become toxic power games when the decision-making itself is shaped by things like worship, repentance, a constant reconnection with the core purpose and values.
So the life of the community shapes the structures, not just the other way around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on.
Okay.
Given this deep link the sources draw between governance and spiritual formation, what's one practical, maybe even small spiritual discipline you could introduce into your team's or your community's decision-making rhythm this week?
Like what?
Maybe it's just 5 minutes of silence before a big vote. Maybe it's starting meetings by intentionally retelling a story that reminds everyone of your founding telos. Something concrete to help ensure that authority is consistently practiced as service, not as power. What could that look like for you?